Welcome back to Wisdom Unveiled. Today, we're doing a really deep dive into the thought of Mulla Sadra, a truly monumental figure.
Absolutely. We're looking at his incredible synthesis from the 17th century.
Yeah, this attempt to finally bring together reason, akal, and revelation. Well, why? And he does it with this, well, frankly radical idea about reality itself.
That it's not static.
Not at all. That it's this constant dynamic flow.
Yeah.
Perpetual becoming.
It's a huge shift. But look, before we really jump in, especially since we're drawing on specific scholarly discussions here, I need to state our usual disclaimer.
Of course. Go ahead.
Okay. So this deep dive, which is episode 13 out of 14, is based on translations and reproductions of conversations with Iranian philosophers, people like Dr. Ebrahim Dinani and Dr. Esmail Mansouri Larijani.
Right.
And because we're dealing with some really complex ideas, philosophy, mysticism, theology, all woven together, some nuances or specific details might not come across perfectly in translation. So we do apologize in advance for any potential discrepancies.
Understood. And honestly, that just highlights the depth we're exploring here.
It really does.
So our mission today is to unpack that core idea, reality, as perpetual becoming. And crucially, we want to show you how this dynamic movement isn't just abstract philosophy.
No, it connects directly to experience.
Exactly, to your own spiritual journey, that feeling of striving, of changing, that's so deeply human. So let's start right there with the link Sadra makes between intellect, aql, and revelation, why.
Sounds good. He lays it out quite clearly.
He does. In his introduction to Shar Yusul al-Kafi, he defines prophethood, nubuwah. He says it's the connection of humans to the supreme originator, Mabda Allah, via way, revelation, for the purpose of completion, guidance, and drawing closer. Taklim.
Okay, it's a lot packed in there. Let's take Mabda Allah, the supreme originator.
What does that mean exactly? Not just a starting point in time.
No, not like, the Big Bang moment. That's thinking within time. Sadra forces us to ask, where does time itself come from?
Okay.
The Mabda has to be the source above time and space. It's not just kicking things off historically. It's the continuous source of existence, moment by moment.
And the way we connect to that source is why? Revelation.
That's the method, yes. He calls why Anba the great news. And importantly, it's not something you perceive with your senses.
Not like seeing or hearing something.
Right. And it's not just imagination or wishful thinking. It even goes beyond our standard logic, premise A plus premise B equals conclusion C.
The syllogistic stuff.
Exactly. Why is more subtle. It requires what Sadra calls the complete human to truly receive it.
But wait, if aql, our intellect, is our highest faculty, why do we need why at all? Can't aql just connect us directly?
That's the crux of it, isn't it? Sadra says why isn't separate from intellect. It is intellect, but it's the total intellect, aql equal.
Okay. So what's the problem with our intellect then?
The problem is we usually operate with just our limited partial intellect, aqli juzi. Think of it like your computer has this massive operating system, the total intellect, but we're just running one little program. Our personal consciousness, our partial intellect.
And that program sets the boundaries of what we can perceive.
Precisely. Our partial intellect, because it's limited, it creates frameworks, boundaries. This is where you get philosophical isms, positivism, rationalism, whatever. They define reality within certain limits.
That's fascinating.
And get this, the word equal itself comes from equal, which means to bind or to restrain.
So intellect, by its nature, limits.
It has a binding function, yes. It takes the infinite reality and structures it into finite concepts we can handle. It has to, otherwise we'd be overwhelmed.
Wow. So the very tool we use to understand reality also kind of filters it.
Exactly right. And why is the transmission that transcends those boundaries? It's the connection to the limitless, the equal.
And why is that connection so vital?
Because Sadra argues all divine perfections, life, power, will, everything ultimately stem from knowledge, ilm. And in us, knowledge manifests primarily as okul, as intellect or consciousness.
So without aql, we can't really manifest any other human qualities.
Fundamentally, no. You need that consciousness, that intellect, as the basis. But our partial intellect isn't enough. We need why, the connection to the total intellect, for completion and true guidance.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly for Sadra's most, really game-changing idea.
Harakat al-Jawhariyya, Transubstantial Motion.
Let's dive into that. So moving into section 1, the principle of perpetual newness.
Right.
You have to remember the context here. For, over 1,000 years? Since Aristotle, really, and codified by thinkers like Avicenna.
The dominant view.
The idea was that substance, jawhar, the actual whatness of a thing, had to be static, unchanging.
It was the anchor. Only the accidents, color, temperature, location, those surface qualities could change.
If the substance changed, the thing wasn't the same thing anymore.
It ceased to be, and something new came into existence that was the bedrock of stability, and Sadra just turns it completely on its head.
With Harakat al-Jawhariyya, Transubstantial Motion, how does he argue for something so radical?
Well, his core point is that substance and accidents aren't actually separate things you can pull apart. They're intrinsically linked, like a flame and its heat. You can't have one without the other in that moment.
Right.
So Sadra says, look around. We constantly observe accidents changing. A seed becomes a tree, a person ages, a piece of wood burns. The accidents are in perpetual flux.
That's undeniable.
Therefore, he argues, the jawhar, the substance itself, must also be undergoing continuous internal transformation. It's not just moving location, its very essence is in a state of constant becoming.
Whoa. So it's not like there's a fixed blueprint and things just change superficially. The blueprint itself is evolving moment by moment.
That's a fantastic way to put it. It's more like a flowing river than a static object. This contrasts sharply with some earlier theological ideas, like the Asherites, who thought God annihilated and recreated the universe every single instant.
Like stop-motion animation.
Kind of, yeah. Sadra says no, the motion is inherent, continuous, smooth, internal. It's an evolutionary unfolding within the substance itself.
And there's a theological reason he needs this theory.
Absolutely. It connects to the nature of God's manifestation. The Quran says, every day he is a new manifestation.
Okay.
If creation were static, it could only receive one fixed manifestation. But God's creative act, his bringing things into existence and sustaining them, is continuous, infinite, ever new.
So creation has to be dynamic to receive that.
Precisely. It needs to be perpetually unfolding, perpetually renewing itself, to be a fitting receptacle for that constant dynamic flow of divine grace and existence, a dynamic receiver for a dynamic giver.
This has immediate implications for us, doesn't it? For you listening right now.
Huge implications.
If the very substance of reality is defined by movement and becoming, then stagnation. Trying to stay the same spiritually or intellectually, it's not just unhelpful.
It's literally a contradiction of how reality is. It's trying to be static in a dynamic universe.
So the spiritual path isn't about arriving at some fixed state of perfection.
No. It's about perpetual striving, continuous seeking. You have to be open to new understanding, new growth, new becoming all the time, because reality itself is constantly unfolding, demanding that your own substance, your jawhar, evolve along with it.
But okay, if everything, including the core substance of things, is constantly moving and changing, doesn't that just lead to chaos? How can anything be stable?
That's the logical next question, and it brings us right into the next key part of Sadra's thought.
All right, this is where it gets really fascinating. Let's move into section 2, the divine mechanism, stability versus stillness. So constant motion. How do we avoid just dissolving into nothingness? Where's the anchor?
Well, Sadra makes a critical distinction here. We need to separate the idea of sukun, which is stillness or inertia.
Like being completely stopped.
Exactly. And thabat, which is stability or constancy.
Okay, stillness versus stability. What's the difference in his view?
Sukun, complete stillness, is actually impossible in Sadra's universe because stillness implies unactualized potential, like something just sitting there passively waiting. But his universe is defined by continuous actuality, by perpetual becoming. There's no room for passive potential just hanging around. Everything is actively realizing itself, moving towards its perfection.
So stillness, in a way, equates to non-existence or a lack of reality in this system.
You could say that. Striving, moving, becoming that is existence. This is why mystics on the path talk about using manzil, temporary resting places, stations on the journey where you pause, reflect, gather strength, but only to prepare for the next stage.
Not a final destination.
Never. They avoid seeking a maskin, a permanent dwelling, a place to settle down and stop moving. The spiritual life is movement.
Okay, but then what about God? The absolute is often described as unchanging, immutable. If everything is motion, how can God provide thabat, stability, without being sukun, still?
That's a profound point. God is pure actuality. There's no potential in God waiting to be actualized. So sukun, stillness conceived as inertia or waiting, doesn't apply.
So God isn't still in that sense?
No. God's essence is perfectly stable, unchanging in its absolute perfection. That's the ultimate thabat. But God is not static or inert.
So how is God dynamic then?
Through the Mayad al-Qayyum, it's this idea of the eternal, ceaseless, overflowing manifestation of his infinite perfections into creation. God isn't changing within himself, but he is constantly pouring forth existence, beauty, knowledge, power.
A continuous creative act.
Exactly. That constant dynamic outflow is God's activity. And it's what maintains the stability of the entire system. The stability comes from the dynamism, not in spite of it.
Wow, okay. The stability is the constant flow.
Precisely. It prevents the system from collapsing into inertia.
So we have this cosmic engine of perpetual becoming, Harakat al-Jawhariyya, grounded in a stability that is itself dynamic. How does this translate to our inner life, our motivation?
That leads us perfectly into the experience of the seeker.
Let's go there. This brings us to section 3, the mystical drive, loving motion, Harakat al-Hubbi. So we've got the philosophical proof that reality moves. How does that feel from the inside?
It's experienced as Harakat al-Hubbi, literally, loving motion. It's this feeling of restless striving and intense longing, hub.
Love, desire.
Yes, but specifically driven by perceiving the constant renewal of divine beauty, Hariya. If the cosmos itself is in constant substantial motion, Jawhariya, the aware soul responds with its own continuous inner motion, driven by love, Hubbi.
So because the object of that love, the divine beauty, is infinite and always revealing more of itself, always intensifying.
Yes, Sadra uses the term rusun, meaning ever-intensifying beauty.
The lover, the seeker, has to keep moving forward just to stay connected. You can never just arrive and say, okay, I've got it. I fully comprehend divine beauty now.
You absolutely cannot. The moment you stop, the beloved in its infinite unfolding has already moved beyond where you stopped. It requires constant pursuit, constant motion, fueled by that love.
That sense of never quite arriving, always striving.
Exactly. And Sadra found a perfect illustration of these dynamics in the Quranic story of Joseph Hassan al-Qasas. He calls it the best of stories, partly because it embodies these different kinds of loving motion so well.
Ah, that's a great way to make this tangible. Can you break down those types of motion in the story?
Sure. He identifies broadly 3 types of Harakat al-Hubbi playing out. First, there's Jacob's love for Joseph.
His lost son.
Right. It's characterized by intense grief, deep sorrow, a longing born from absence and loss. It's a powerful motivator. It moves Jacob's soul profoundly, but it's fundamentally reactive, driven by pain.
Okay, movement born from that negative space, that absence.
Exactly. Then second, you have Zuleika's love, or rather passion ishq for Joseph.
The obsessive kind.
Yes, it's raw, consuming, turbulent, chaotic. It definitely forces motion. She's constantly maneuvering and plotting. But it's driven by a desire for possession, for control of the beautiful object. It lacks higher purpose.
Like a whirlpool versus a river.
That's a good analogy. And that brings us to the third type, Joseph's own love. His movement isn't frantic like Zuleika's or consumed by grief like Jacob's.
How is his movement characterized?
It's directed towards the divine proof, Burhan al-Rab. It's steady, patient, purposeful. Even through immense hardship, the well, slavery, prison, his orientation remains towards God, towards truth. It's an evolutionary movement seeking alignment with the divine will.
That's the mature spiritual movement.
That's the ideal Harakat al-Hubbi, the inner loving motion that mirrors the purposeful evolutionary motion of the cosmos itself, the Harakat al-Jawhariyya.
So Sadra is basically giving us the philosophical mechanics, the why behind the mystical path. Jawhariyya is the cosmic reason everything must evolve, and Hubbi is the psychological and spiritual experience, the how of that drive within us.
Beautifully put. He connects the metaphysical structure of reality directly to the felt experience of the soul seeking perfection.
It's an incredible synthesis. Let's try and pull all these threads together now.
What?
We arrive at section 4, the synthesis and divine dialectic. We've seen how Sadra links Aql and why, how he establishes perpetual becoming, Jawhariyya, and how that drives loving motion, Hubbi. How does he weave these into one cohesive picture? And surprisingly, opposition plays a key role.
Yes, tazad, opposition or contrast. This might be one of his most sort of counterintuitive but profound insights, especially for how reality functions. We tend to see opposition, conflict, tension, paradox as a problem to be solved.
Or a sign of imperfection.
You're right. But Sadra argues that opposition is actually necessary for the continuous flow of existence and divine grace.
So,
think about it. If everything were perfectly uniform, perfectly harmonious, completely homogeneous, there'd be no tension, no gradient.
And without tension.
There's no impetus for movement. It would lead to sukun, stillness. Contrasts light and dark, high and low, knowledge and ignorance, even heaven and hell in a theological sense, create the dynamic tension that prevents stagnation and drives the whole system forward. Opposition isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's the engine of dynamism.
Wow, so conflict isn't something to just eliminate, but something whose energy needs to be channeled.
In a sense, yes. And where does this play out most intensely? Within humanity.
Right at the center of it.
Exactly. Sadra says humans are uniquely created as a mahjun.
A mixture.
A mixture, a concoction, precisely. We have both angelic potentials pulling us towards intellect, al-Quill, and the divine, and also satanic or lower potentials pulling us towards base desires, ego fixation, inertia.
So we are literally the battleground for this cosmic dialectic.
We are where these opposing forces meet most acutely. Our path, therefore, is inherently one of struggle, of navigating this internal tension. It has to be dynamic movement. But crucially, we aren't left adrift.
We have the compass.
We have al-Quill, the intellect, enlightened potentially by why, as our internal guide through this necessary struggle.
And this vision of the self as a dynamic, evolving mixture. What does that mean for ideas like reincarnation?
Yes, Tanask. Sadra's system fundamentally rejects the common understanding of reincarnation. Because reincarnation typically assumes a static soul, like a little unchanging marble that just jumps from one body to another.
Right, the soul stays the same, the container changes.
But Sadra says, no. Your very substance, your jawhar, is undergoing Harakat al-Jawhariyya, constant internal evolution. You aren't a static thing that can be put into different boxes. Your identity is tied to your unique, unfolding, unrepeatable journey of becoming.
So there's no going back, no repeating a life.
Not in that sense. It's always forward motion, a continuous refinement and elevation of your own unique, substantial reality. The whole system is geared towards progressive ascent, not cyclical repetition of the same identity.
It's a powerful vision. Mulla Sadra presents reality, and our place in it not as finding a fixed point, but as embracing this continuous, purposeful, dynamic movement.
Towards ever greater perfection, yes. Synthesizing the rational demand of Unveiled to understand with the spiritual, loving drive of Hubby to connect and become. The greatest struggle, then, isn't against external forces.
It's against our own pull towards stillness.
Towards Sukun, yes. Against our own inertia. And Sadra gives us the ultimate philosophical and spiritual reason why we must engage in that struggle, because inertia, stillness, is an illusion. It's contrary to the very nature of a constantly flowing, infinitely renewed creation. The dynamic struggle is the path.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, something to really reflect on this week. If your deepest identity, the very substance of who you are, is this constant loving motion towards an ever-renewing, ever-intensifying perfection, where in your own life might you be clinging to stillness? Are you defining yourself, perhaps unconsciously, by a static snapshot, maybe a past achievement, a past failure, a job title, an old hurt, a fixed belief? Are you holding on to a mask and a permanent dwelling instead of embracing the profound, maybe even unsettling reality that you are right now in this very moment, infinite becoming?